I was seated cross-legged on the cool, smooth floor of what looked like a yoga studio. My legs were folded into lotus pose, and I drew in a long, calming breath, preparing for whatever came next. Then, I opened my mouth and spoke, completely out of nowhere. Try YogaFit free for 7 days. I stopped cold. What did I just say? Where am I? I looked around, my heart pounding. This wasn't familiar. I was in a spacious room, which could have been a yoga studio, but there was something off about it. No one else was here, and the walls were bare except for a giant mirror that spanned the entire far side of the room. The floor beneath me was cold linoleum, and my body felt strangely disconnected from the moment. I couldn't hear anything, nothing but the soft echo of my own voice. What's going on? I cleared my throat. Hello? Anyone there? My voice barely broke the silence, a faint whisper instead of the shout I intended. I frowned, standing up, scanning the room for some sign of life. But there was no door. Wait, what? I took a few steps, searching the walls. 4 of them, with no exit. The mirror stretched across one wall, reflecting back my wide-eyed expression. The others were painted in a bland, almost sickly shade of beige. There wasn't even a hidden door. No window. Hello? I tried again, louder this time. Anybody? The silence hung heavily in the air, oppressive. I stood there, in the middle of the room, mind racing. How had I gotten here? I didn't remember driving. I didn't even recognize this place. My usual studio was a cramped, chaotic hole in the wall near the strip mall on 85. This was nothing like that. What's the last thing I remember? Maddie's fall off the bed. That must have been a few days ago, right? Or... no, it was the doctor's office, wasn't it? The ENT. The vertigo. And then... everything after that was a blur. The last thing I could clearly recall was walking to my car in the parking garage, but after that, nothing. It was like someone had just wiped my memory clean. I turned in a slow circle, inspecting every inch of the room. No exit. No windows. Just beige walls, a mirror, and the strange quiet that pressed in from all sides. My thoughts raced, there had to be a way out. I looked up. That's when I noticed it. A small, square cutout in the ceiling. A trapdoor? It was about 5 feet above me. Had I been dropped in here somehow? I jumped, reaching for it, but I couldn't even come close. I tried again, then a 3rd time. Each failed attempt made my frustration grow, until finally... the room suddenly tilted. My body twisted and fell, and I found myself back on the floor, my limbs moving involuntarily. It was like my muscles had been hijacked by some unseen force. Before I could even react, speakers crackled to life overhead. A man's voice echoed in the room. Feeling tired and sluggish? Try YogaFit free for 7 days. Just 10 minutes a day can double your energy levels and bring calm to your mind. My body continued to move against my will, flowing into the next yoga pose. Downward facing dog. Then cat-cow. Then, finally, lotus again. I wanted to scream, but my mouth wouldn't open. Instead, I gritted my teeth, struggling against the invisible force that controlled me. Try YogaFit free for 7 days. I said with a forced cheerfulness that was far from my real emotions. The moment the words left my mouth, my body released from the unseen grip. I collapsed, gasping for breath, muscles twitching as if I'd just run a marathon. What the hell just happened? This couldn't be real. This had to be a nightmare, or some kind of mental breakdown. I stumbled to my feet, disoriented and shaken, and looked for some escape route, some way out. Then I saw something strange. In the mirror, there was a flicker. I blinked. It wasn't just my reflection that was visible, it looked like there was something beyond the glass, a faint bluish glow. I rushed toward the mirror, pressing my hands against it, trying to peer through. Two-way mirror. I could see a dim, neglected room behind it. Empty, except for a camera, which was trained directly on me. I felt a wave of panic surge in my chest. Anger burned in my veins. They were watching me. I slammed my fists against the mirror. "Let me out!" I screamed. "Please, I have kids. Please, just let me out." I kept hitting it, each blow making my hands ache, but the mirror stayed firm. Then I heard the unmistakable buzz of the speakers again. A woman's voice came through, mechanical and distant. "User report, offensive ad content." I froze. Then, the pain came. A sharp, searing shock shot through my ankle, sending my body into uncontrollable spasms. I couldn't even scream as the pain overwhelmed me. It stopped as suddenly as it had started, and I realized my ankle was bound by something. A metal strip. They'd shocked me. The room tilted once more. The voice from the speakers resumed, indifferent to my suffering. "Feeling sluggish and tired?" Before I knew it, my body was moving again. More yoga poses, this time even more painful than before. Each one felt like it was tearing me apart. But I couldn't stop it. I finished in lotus pose, and the words escaped my lips once again, though they didn't feel like mine. "Try Yoga Fit free for 7 days." The moment I could move again, I staggered toward the ceiling, searching for any way to escape. My eyes landed on a small door hidden in the drywall, barely 4 feet tall. I hadn't noticed it before. I ripped it open and found a small crawl space, cluttered with junk, boxes, rope, tools, and a stepladder. I dragged everything into place, stacking boxes to reach the trapdoor above. As I climbed, the room tilted again, the invisible force taking over. "Feeling sluggish and tired?" The voice mocked me, and I fell back into the poses, helpless. But this time, I didn't give up. I gathered all the materials again, climbed the ladder, stacked the boxes higher, praying I would reach in time. I finally grabbed the edge of the trapdoor, prying it open with a groan of metal. I pulled myself up, gasping for air. I was standing on the roof of a massive building. A warehouse, maybe. As I looked around, I recognized the office building across the street. It was in Franklin, just south of the town I lived in. The voice from the trapdoor echoed once more, but I had made it out. Only 10 minutes a day. I walked to the edge of the roof, my legs unsteady, and screamed for help. Weeks later, no one cared. The police never found anything, and the company behind Yoga Fit had vanished from every trace of the internet. The worst part? I found something online when I tried to search for the truth about the whole ordeal. Not using my name, of course, but describing what happened to me. I found comments, on YouTube, buried in random threads. Did anyone see that weird yoga ad? Something was off about the woman in it, like she was trying to escape or something. The comments echoed my worst fears. They'd turned my suffering into an ad, and the world just moved on. The sound of the door opening had always been a small comfort. A routine, something familiar. Molly would take her 2 boys, Ben and Alex, to soccer practice, leaving me to quietly wait for their return. But that day, it was different. I had been trying to pass the time, flipping through channels absent-mindedly when suddenly, the sharp crack of glass shattered the silence. My heart lurched in my chest. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, echoed faintly from somewhere in the house. A cold, crawling fear started to crawl up my spine. The door creaked open, and a figure appeared in the doorway. He was masked, the kind of mask that made you feel like you were staring at something otherworldly, something faceless. The soft, dissonant whistle that escaped his lips made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I had never seen him before, and the unfamiliarity of it only deepened my terror. The masked man moved with a slow, calculated grace, his whistling a weird contrast to the tension that filled the room. It was as if he found this whole situation thrilling, like a kid sneaking up on a spider to crush it beneath his heel. "Perfect," I heard him whisper, his voice gleaming with some twisted satisfaction. He crouched behind the heavy curtain, his breath deepening, his presence so palpable that it felt like the air itself had thickened around me. I could only listen, frozen, as the minutes dragged on. The front door opened again, this time accompanied by the familiar sound of Molly's footsteps as she came back into the house. Her presence should have been a relief. Instead, it amplified the terror crawling through me. She walked into the room, oblivious to the danger lurking just a few feet away. A small, comforting smile spread across her face as she approached me. I wanted to scream. To warn her. To shout that she was in danger. But the words wouldn't come. I couldn't move. The killer didn't hesitate. In one fluid motion, he stepped from behind the curtain, a glint of steel flashing in the dim light. The blade slid under Molly's chin before she could even process what was happening. A soft, wet sound filled the room as the knife sliced through her throat. She gasped for air, her hands clutching at the wound in a desperate, futile attempt to stop the blood. Ben, her older son, walked in then. His eyes locked onto his mother, her hand still pressed to her throat, blood slipping through her fingers. He saw the horror, the life draining from her face. I could see his confusion, his panic. He must have tried to understand, to do something, but it was too late. Before he could react, the killer was on him. The knife plunged into his spine, and Ben collapsed in a heap, his last breath a strangled gasp. A second slash, quick and brutal, ended any hope of him surviving. The house fell into a horrifying silence. Alex, the youngest, was still upstairs in his room, completely unaware of the nightmare that had just unfolded. I could hear him, his gaming chair squeaking, the sound of his headphones blasting music or a video game soundtrack. He had no idea what was waiting for him. The killer moved upstairs, footsteps light but sure. I heard the faintest sounds, but I didn't need to see what happened next. I could hear it. The sickening sound of a struggle. A cry that never reached the air. Then, silence again. When it was all over, the killer returned downstairs, as calm and collected as he'd been from the start. His movements were methodical, almost clinical. He wiped away any evidence, as if he'd rehearsed it 100 times. Before leaving, he approached me, leaning down to look me straight in the eyes. He pulled off his mask, revealing a face that was completely ordinary, unremarkable, even. A face that didn't belong to a monster. "Funny," he said, almost as if talking to himself. "You're the only witness, and you can't even scream." His laugh was cold, without humor, before he turned and walked out of the room, leaving me alone with the carnage. Hours later, Molly's husband came home. He stepped into the house, expecting a simple evening with his family. Instead, he was met with the brutal aftermath. His world, his life, was shattered. The horror of what he found was enough to break him completely. He stumbled through the house, unable to comprehend the loss, the ruin of everything he loved. He dropped to his knees, inconsolable. Soon, the police arrived. They processed the scene, collecting evidence, taking pictures of the bodies. Men in white suits moved through the house, silent and grim. One of the men, a tall figure with dark hair, paused in front of the camera. I watched as he took a deep breath. And then, he started to whistle. The same tune. The same haunting melody. My blood ran cold. He lowered the camera and turned to face me, his eyes locking with mine. His smile stretched across his face, familiar and chilling all at once. "Hey, little hamster," he said softly, his voice almost too calm. "Remember me? Want to hear something funny? I'm going to make it look like Dad did it." The world tilted around me. The killer wasn't just a stranger. He was still here, still watching. And he was about to destroy another life. All I could do was sit there, a mute witness to everything.